And notice the United States isn't pushing back on the rhetoric. The Russians are going, hey, the U.S. is fighting a proxy war against us. I think the answer is yes, we are.
The House has approved a $40 billion aid package for Ukraine.
Money for military, largest single military package yet for Ukraine.
The president warning the risk of nuclear Armageddon has not been this high since the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Time is running out for the United States to prepare itself and allies for a possible war with China.
You have a conflict in East Asia, a conflict in Ukraine, and that's really the beginnings of the world's next global war.
Welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. This is our 124th episode. My name's Andy Zee. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California. We open today's show with images of the continuing ratcheting up of the danger of war. A war that could potentially escalate to a major, even nuclear war. A war that threatens the very survival of humanity. You've heard of the obscene game of Russian roulette? Well, the rulers of this system are playing the most dangerous game of Russian, US, and China roulette with the future of humanity at stake. Last week, we promised a deep, substantive discussion of this situation. What are the interests of the people of the world in this conflict? And we're going to get to that discussion very soon. But look, this is a time of great peril for the future of humanity. A moment when there's not only the danger of catastrophic war, but the devastation of the environment caused by the workings of the capitalist imperialist system we live under, with the US, the #1 contributor to this destruction. And this is also a time where here in this country, the extremely sharp divides throughout society, and especially among those who rule, there is even serious talk of a new civil war. And against this backdrop of a perilous future, you are watching the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. And this show, the RNL Show, is a program about and dedicated to revolution. A real revolution to overthrow this system and replace this system with a radically different and far better society on the road to human emancipation. That requires leadership, strategic leadership that has charted a map for the difficult but liberating road to overthrow this system through an actual revolution. Leadership that knows where humanity needs to go. Leadership that has a vision and a plan for a radically new and far better emancipating society that would lead to the emancipation of all of humanity, and not just to a change at the top with the masses of people left behind. And we have that leadership in Bob Avakian, whose voice and guidance we follow and bring to you every week on the RNL Show. And in our last episode, we said that we were going to make an important announcement. But first, I want to welcome my co-host, Sunsara Taylor, to the RNL Show, to this special show.
Andy, I'm so glad to be with you, and I want to welcome everybody tuning in from around the country, around the world, and especially our new viewers. It is a special episode. I don't want to waste any more time before we get to our really big announcement. Go ahead, Andy.
Sunsara, you and I just had the most incredible and unique experience. We had the opportunity to sit down and interview Bob Avakian, BA, over several hours. We invited a small audience. This was a special and incredibly important experience that we're going to bring to the RNL Show. Bob Avakian is a leader for this time when the future hangs in the balance. And it's going to really matter for people to experience our up-close and really personal conversation with BA. What comes through in these conversations is Bob Avakian's heart and soul, his visceral feeling for the masses of people of the world, and the way he gets their potential, all of which contributes to his being really hardcore for an actual revolution. In these interviews, we get into his life, his stories, and the scientific method and approach to understanding the world, to making revolution, to what kind of new society we are aiming to bring into being. So the big announcement is that these rare up-close interviews will be aired over 3 shows beginning on November 3rd, continuing on November 10th, and then concluding on November 17th.
So in a little while, we're going to tell you more about the big premieres that we are planning to launch these 3 special episodes on November 3rd, and ways that we want to invite you into making this a very big deal throughout society. But first, we want to share with you an early release excerpt of this interview. a teaser, if you will. And it's also, as Andy said, we promised a big segment on the intensifying danger of war, inter-imperialist war, and even nuclear war. This is a topic that we got into. It's one of many topics we got into in this interview. So we want to share with you one of the questions and answers from the second interview, the second sit down we had with Bob Avakian, where we asked him about this. So let's go to that right now.
Okay, so Bob Avakian, welcome back to the second part of our interview on the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be here.
Okay, so in our previous discussion, we began to discuss the essential analysis and a roadmap that's in your work, Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating. And so today we want to dig a bit more into that, and we also want to take a look at the larger objective situation, which is really pressing down on humanity right now. We want to begin with this heightened danger towards war, including a major war. So first of all, what is shaking the major power centers and has people all over the world, I think, very concerned is Putin's outrageous declaration to annex 1/5, I believe, of the country of Ukraine, territories that are currently contested, if not even dominated now by the Ukraine. And so that as part of this, he declared that any attack on this territory would be considered an attack on Russia and treated as such, including potentially the use of nuclear weapons. And then there's Biden answering in kind, threatening him back, and even as you were bringing out the other day informally that he's threatening China over Taiwan. So it's a very dangerous situation. But it would be very helpful, I think, and people want to know from you what's going on here and how should people understand this situation.
Well, I think the most essential thing is this is contention among different imperialist powers. The U.S. has been the dominant power in the world, and Russia went through the whole thing where the Soviet Union imploded. It hadn't been socialist for a long time, but it had been pretending to be socialist, and then eventually gave that up, and the Soviet Union went out of existence. And Russia became very weak. You know, they had that guy Yeltsin in there who could hardly stay sober for a day, you know, as a head of state, you know, and Russia became basically just, you know, a very subordinate to the U.S. and to the whole, you know, quote unquote Western alliance. And ever since Putin came in, his whole program has been to reassert, you know, first of all, you know, Russian integrity, but also just Russian influence in the world, you know, as an imperialist power, which is what it is. It's a openly capitalist and imperialist power, and it's, you know, trying to break out of the subordinate position that it's been in particularly since the disintegration of the Soviet Union. And so this explains what he's been doing. You know, he went into Georgia and a number of years back, you know, and now into Ukraine. And, you know, I think we could speculate, but I think Putin made some miscalculations. That I think he felt that the U.S. and its Western imperialist alliance would make a lot of noise. Maybe they'd do some economic sanctions, but I don't really think that he understood that they would really throw as much into this as they have this is basically a war being fought by the U.S. with Ukrainian soldiers against Russian imperialism. And, you know, the intelligence, increasingly the planning, the heavy armament, the most up-to-date weapons, this is all U.S., you know, and it's just the Ukrainians are the foot soldiers and the cannon fodder for this on that side of it. The U.S. has openly declared that its intention is to administer a defeat to Russia in order to weaken its overall challenge to U.S. imperialism. So, you know, that's why they've thrown everything they have into it. You know, just to go back for a second, I think Putin also miscalculated, thinking that he could send in the sort of lightly armed troops and quickly take over the country. And he probably preferred to do that from the point of view of, like, then you have more of a country, you know, that's intact rather than one that's devastated. And that was a miscalculation because already, you know, not only were the Ukrainians putting up a resistance, but the U.S. was already throwing a lot in to help them. So the U.S. has openly declared that its goal is to administer defeat to Russia. And on the other side, you know, Putin is very clear he's not going to accept a defeat. For the same kind of logic, it's imperialist gangster logic. Neither side can afford to suffer a defeat. So what do you get then? Well, Putin talks about, okay, now this territory that you're referring to, that they've annexed through these ridiculous referenda. By the way, just speaking of ridiculous referenda, I have to say this. Once again, world-class hypocrisy from the U.S. imperialists. They went into Iraq, occupied the country illegally. It was a violation of international law, just a blatant international war crime. They went into Iraq, got rid of the existing government, put in a puppet government, and then held elections while their troops are occupying the country. But that was a free and fair election, don't you know? But now when Putin does the same thing in these sections of Ukraine, that he's annexed, this is a sham. This is, everybody has to denounce this. I mean, can't you see how ridiculous this is? This is anything but a free and fair election, unlike the ones we had in Iraq when we were occupying. Of course, they don't really say that, but that's the reality of it, right? So, Putin has annexed these sections of the Ukraine, and he has made a statement that any threat to the integrity, of Russia or to the territory of Russia, any threat, he will use all weapons available, which means, and he repeated it twice and said this is not a bluff, it means that puts nuclear weapons on the table. Even if you're talking about tactical nuclear weapons, these have tremendous devastating effect. Let's not pretend they're some minor thing, just tactical. They have tremendous devastating effect. So he's taken that stand. Now the U.S. is saying, well, if Putin does that, then we'll, I've seen some military analysts on the U.S. side, we'll go in and destroy all of his forces in Ukraine, knock out his fleet, and so on and so forth. And then what do you think Putin would do? They're saying, we won't go nuclear. Even if Putin goes nuclear, we won't go nuclear. We'll just destroy all of his troops and his fleet, devastate his fleet. So what is Putin going to do in a situation like that? This is what I point out in this article. You get on this very deadly trajectory of escalation where neither side can accept a defeat, and pretty soon you're at the threshold of strategic nuclear weapons that could do devastation to the entire world and, vast numbers, if not humanity as a whole. So this is what we're up against, and the big problem is, I just have to comment, you got all these people that pretend that they're progressive and whatever, and they're all going right along with U.S. imperialism and this, and under the banner that Biden and all these people are putting out about this is a world, this is a contest in the United States and throughout the world between democracy and autocracy. Trump is an autocrat. Putin is an autocrat. Xi Jinping is an autocrat. Of course, they don't talk about their own autocrats, like the heads of the government, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, you can go down the list, that are all part of their alliance. Hungary, Poland, what have you. Those are all autocratic governments. But there are autocratic governments, like they said about the Shah of Iran back in 1978 when the uprising was occurring, which eventually led to his overthrow. There was an article that said, the Shah, in one of the major newspapers in this country that said, the Shah of Iran may be a despot, but he's our despot. So, our autocrats are okay, but the ones that are challenging our dominance in the world and our ability to plunder and slaughter people all over the world, which is what they've been doing forever, those autocrats are no good. This is not a battle, just even looking beneath the surface, you can see that this is a battle between imperialist powers, all of which, on both sides, have whole histories of horrendous atrocities and, base themselves on vicious exploitation of people and oppression of people all over the world. This is what's at stake. And I just have to say, certain people who have postured as being progressive have come out and made the most outrageous statements in the context thing. And I'm going to say it, little Stephen, come out and saying, well, we're more powerful than Russia. Why don't we just bomb the shit out of them? What are these people thinking? They're so committed, ultimately, despite their progressive pretensions, they're so committed to U.S. imperialism that they've almost lost their fucking minds. What do you think is going to happen? You go bomb Russia. Why don't we just wipe out all their Air Force? I mean, this kind of talk is like totally reckless and irresponsible. And when it comes from people with so-called progressive pretensions, it's all the more disgusting. I just have to say that. And people need to get up off this American chauvinism. You know, this country, you know, look, you know, and some of the same people who would rattle on about the whole history of this country and slavery and all that, turn around and, you know, and are either silent or openly supportive of the same system when it goes into the international arena to enforce its parasitism of plundering and exploiting people all over the world, because I guess they have a little bit of a sense. You know, it's like somebody once said, somebody once wrote saying, living in this country is a little bit like living in the house of Tony Soprano. You know that there's a lot of goodies coming in. You don't know exactly, maybe you're not really entirely up on what Tony Soprano's doing out there, but you kind of have a sense that whatever he's doing, and however, you know, fucked up you might think it would be, is allowing you to have all the goodies that comes from living in the house. And that's what that's what the attitude of a lot of these American chauvinists, you know, so-called progressives, you know, and people need to get up off this and wake up to what's actually happening and what look at you know, you think the history of this ruling class in this country is somehow divorced from what they do in the world as a whole? You know, do you think their nature changes when they go outside the borders of the U.S. and all of a sudden they become, you know, really kind-hearted people, you know, who are carrying out charity around the world? You know, yeah, they do some charity to cover up the crimes that they're committing. I mean, you know, we came forward, me and people of my generation came forward during Vietnam, you know, the Vietnam War. And, you know, I did a lot of study of that, and so did many other people, to see what was actually going on in that war. And, you know, we discovered that, and this is why a lot of the American troops rebelled, because of the atrocities they were being ordered to carry out. I mean, wiping out whole villages, you know, with old people and children, just wiping them out, shooting babies. And I'm not exaggerating. Go look into it if you think I'm exaggerating. You know, they killed between 2 and 3 million civilians in the country of Vietnam, which at the time had a population maybe of only a little more than 10 times that. You know, and, you know, the troops, you know, not only were they, you know, turning whole sections of women in the capital of Saigon and other places, in, you know, forcing them into prostitution, but they were mass raping women, you know, in these villages, all, you know, just, you know, you can just read up on this, you know, and so this has not changed. The nature of this system that did all that in Vietnam has not changed, you know, and what has changed is some of the people opposing them are not people you can support, like Islamic fundamentalists who carry out all kinds of atrocities of their own, although on a scale, they can only envy what the U.S. imperialists do on the scale that they do it. You know, or Russia and China, you mentioned China, you know, first of all, Nancy Pelosi goes to Taiwan. Supposedly, everybody doesn't challenge the insistence by the Chinese government in Beijing that Taiwan is part of China. Supposedly even the U.S. policy doesn't challenge that, even though they have all these relations with Taiwan. Well, she went over there and essentially said differently, you know, and basically treated Taiwan as an independent country, you know, and it was a deliberate provocation. And, you know, I'm not defending the Chinese imperialist rulers. We're very clear that they're also capitalist imperialists and have been since capitalism was restored in China shortly after the death of Mao decades ago in 1976. But nevertheless, this was a provocation, and then it's followed up by Biden making a point of having himself interviewed where he can say, you know, answer the question, well, you know, if the Chinese, i.e. meaning the, you know, the Chinese on the mainland, the People's Republic of China, attacks Taiwan, will the U.S. troops, in other words, U.S. armed forces, get involved on the side of Taiwan? He made a, I mean, you know, look, when you interview the President of the United States, you don't ask questions the President of the United States doesn't want to ask, okay, unless you're some hostile force, and this reporter was not. So then Biden has the opportunity to say, yes, we'll get involved militarily. Well, that's a provocation against China, and it's actually an invitation, if you want to look at it in a certain light. It can be seen as an invitation to them to attack Taiwan quicker. You rather, you know, because the U.S. would be less set up to get involved. So, you know, this is the dangers that are going on. And all this ridiculous stuff, people sticking their heads down, or, I stay in my own lane. You think if there's a nuclear war, it won't touch your lane? I mean, come on, let's get fucking serious around here. You think if U.S. and China go to war, your lane is going to be somehow, I'm just going along in my lane. I mean, people need to wake up and get serious. This is a contest between oppressors, the world's leading oppressors, with the U.S. #1. Yes, USA #1 oppressor and plunderer in the entire world for decades. And, it's up to us to oppose our own ruling class. Yes, we also oppose Russian imperialism. Yes, we also oppose Chinese imperialism. But we're not living in Russia, and we're not living in China. And if we were living in Russia and China, our primary focus would be on opposing our ruling class where we were. We live in the United States. All these crimes committed by these imperialists are done in our name. Supposedly, the army goes out there to protect our freedoms and blah, blah, blah. They go out there to plunder people so that U.S. imperialism can suck the blood of literally billions of people. And if you think I'm exaggerating, go on the website, revcom.us, and read the articles by Raymond Latta, which get into the parasitism of U.S. imperialism, how it is an international exploiter and super exploiter of people in the global south or the third world, the poorer countries of the world, and what this has to do with what the U.S. looks like internally and how it thrives. Even the consumer goods that people have are cheapened, more affordable to the massive population here because of the way that people are viciously exploited. More than 150 million children in the third world who have no childhood. Hundreds of millions of women, like those in Bangladesh working in factories making the stuff that goes to Walmart or whatever. People all over the world in similar situations. It is our responsibility to oppose this primarily, while we also oppose these other imperialists. This is where we live. This is being done, and all these massive crimes, and now the threat of existential threat of nuclear war. A threat to that's what existential means, threat to the existence of humanity. All that's being done in our name. And idiots like, Steve Van Sant aside, now I'm giving him a break by saying idiocy. We have a responsibility to first and foremost oppose our own imperialist ruling class and what it's doing. And more generally, I've made a statement and I'll make it again. The masses of people in the world, and this is very acutely and urgently posed now, the masses of people in the world cannot any longer afford. It was always terrible that these are the people ruling the world, but it's now acutely posed. We can no longer afford to allow these imperialists to dominate the world and to determine the destiny of humanity. They need to be overthrown as quickly as possible.
Humanity can no longer afford to allow these imperialists on any side to rule over us and to battle over who's going to dominate in this situation. We need an actual revolution. And this interview, the scope of what you're going to get in it, is an invitation into this revolution. It's an invitation to meet the leader of this revolution. So I want to reiterate, before we share a little bit about what it was like to do this interview and what you're going to get as you experience all three segments of it, I want to remind you that it launches in 2 weeks on November 3rd. This needs to be a major launch. We need thousands and thousands of people tuning in to watch this online everywhere. And then the next 2 weeks that follow it, part 2 and part 3, we need to build that audience, expand, draw in many more people. In Los Angeles, we're going to have a very special in-person screening of the launch of this, an in-person premiere. Andy and I will be there together to host it. There'll also be in-person screenings of the first premiere on November 3rd in Chicago at the Revolution Club Center, in New York and Berkeley at the Revolution bookstores. So we'll talk more about that in a minute, but Andy, let's share.
Well, Sunsara, the sharpness of what we just saw, the sharpness with which Bob Avakian cut through the dangerous bullshit that dominates the media and progressive strata, that the U.S. is a force for good and not autocrats. And he does this without siding with the U.S.'s imperialist rivals. And he delivers this with a biting acuity and even humor. And what we saw in this first segment of the second episode was just one dimension of what we get in these interviews. There's whole dimensions of Bob Avakian's heart in the up-close and personal side of him in the episodes to come. And also in the course of these, he discusses the biggest questions facing humanity. And in how he does it, we learn about and we hear stories about his life and what created all the empathy, the integrity, the curiosity, the generous spirit, and the tremendous feeling for the masses of people of the world.
It's true. It's really true what you say about the humor and the generosity of spirit. He's dealing with things that are the fate of humanity. Serious as a heart attack, and the man is serious. He's scientific, he's hardcore for revolution, as you said before, and he's also hilarious, and he's so warm, and there's so much hope and so much joy and love expressed in this interview. It's really going to be an incredible experience to watch. It was incredible to be part of. And through it all, you get, including very new people who've never encountered this revolution before, are going to get from him, in his words, a sense of why we need this revolution. Why a revolution is really possible, how we go about working for that, and what this revolution is aiming for, the emancipatory vision that will lift people's sights and invite them into this fight.
You know, here on the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, we often speak of the scientific method and the approach to reality and to revolution that's been developed by Bob Avakian, and how this has contributed to his developing a whole new framework for human emancipation. He speaks to this directly in the first of our interviews that we'll be showing on November 3rd. And yet at the same time, it comes through in how he discusses the big questions facing people here and around the world.
You are also going to get the sense, when you watch these, you're going to get the confidence that this is a person who could lead an actual revolution. And you're also going to come to understand that this is somebody who can lead masses of people from all different sections of society, including those who catch the worst hell at the bottom of society, those who are written off and beaten down. Lead them to rise up and become emancipators of humanity to make this revolution. This is a leader who can bring that forward. You're going to see that when you watch this. There is none of the spin and none of the bullshit that you get from all these so-called leaders who are trotted out, these politicians we're told to follow. BA is for real.
Yeah, we both felt that in this, and the audience who was there felt the same thing. And then you're going to feel that, and you have a big role to play in this. But before we move on to what our plans are and your who are watching this, your role in making a big impact with these three interviews and growing the audience of the RNL show, we should all recognize the significance of Bob Avakian doing this at this moment when not only does the future of humanity hang in the balance with the threat of nuclear war and the possible extinction of humanity through climate change. Look, Bob Avakian has analyzed that this is a rare time in this country when revolution could be possible, and these interviews are a crucial part of preparing the people and organizing the force to rise to this moment. He's done this. He's laid out a plan and an analysis of this situation in a crucial work for this moment, titled Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating. Profound crisis, deepening divisions, the looming possibility of civil war, and the revolution that is urgently needed, a necessary foundation and a basic roadmap for this revolution. We get into this very concretely during these interviews, but even more than that this is such a time underscores not just the historic importance of his doing these interviews, Sunsara, at this time, but all of our responsibility to make these interviews a really big deal and seen by masses of people.
Yeah, I also want to mention, and we've covered it here as well, that there's been constant snark, attacks, baseless slanders, accusations of cult hurled against Bob Avakian. These interviews are one of the most powerful refutations of that. You get a sense of who this leader really is. Also, I'll let you in on this. Andy and I ask him about these attacks, and he responds to them directly. So you'll get to see that in the course of this. But this also underscores the importance of all of us who really want radical change, who want to see humanity emancipated, who wish for and want to work for a real revolution, to defend this leader, to build up support for him. So this is also something you're going to get a deeper sense of as you watch, the importance of who he is and the need to defend him.
If you are a person of integrity, If you have respect for what is actually true, you'll watch these interviews and experience Bob Avakian not just for yourself, but because people need to know what they have in this leader.
So now we want to share 4 ways that you can be involved in spreading and building the audience for these interviews. Whether you first learned about Bob Avakian just today through the segment we just showed, or whether you've been following him and fighting for the revolution he is fighting for a very long time. So the first thing is start making a plan right now to bring people together, people you know, on Thursday, November 3rd, to watch the premiere of the first installment of this interview that'll be broadcast on this channel. And then to tune in again over the next 2 weeks on November 10th and 17th. So each of these interviews is about 90 minutes long. And we encourage you to share the excerpt that we aired today. Show it to friends, to coworkers, family, classmates, people that you know. Ask for their ideas about who they want to share this with and who they want to invite to view this with you on November 3rd. And again, if you're in Los Angeles, come to the in-person screening, the premiere that we're going to be hosting, Andy and I, here in Los Angeles. And also, if you're in New York, Chicago, Bay Area, mark your calendars and bring other people you know to the in-person screenings there as well. We'll be posting the details at revcom.us, and we'll share them on our episode next week here as well.
Yes, that's right, Sunsara. And as you do this, you're going to have to challenge and struggle with people. What's concentrated in these interviews, the scope and what BA concerns himself with, what he's conveying to you is radically different than how most people are currently thinking, let alone what they're doing. When you reach out and spread the word about the Bob Avakian interviews on the RNL Show and you promote them on your social media, you are likely to run into all sorts of excuses that amount to going along with the way things have been, and worse, doing nothing in the face of this dangerous time that is heading to a really terrible future. And this is avoiding learning about the one way out of the madness of today and the possibility of an emancipating future. You know, people might say voting is the answer when that's what got us into this mess in the first place. Or they say they support reforms that never come and get snatched away anyway, like the right to abortion. Some people are just in despair, and others bury their heads hoping things will go back to normal, a normal that we are not going back to and was a horror for most anyway. Or they say, I don't want to hear anything from an old white guy. I don't agree with communism. At bottom, they might argue that you can't really change things. A radically new world is impossible. Look, all of this is just the system speaking, and it is fucking irresponsible to the future to not watch these interviews and do so with an open mind. You want to know how to struggle with people? You just watched it several times in the excerpts we just saw. If you are watching this show, then you have curiosity. You want answers. And that is enough for you to go out and struggle with people who raise these things, to have the integrity, to have the concern for the future, to experience and hear BA, to recognize the importance of, at this moment, for people to seriously engage and then struggle over what is the way forward for humanity, and to not wallow in ignorance and ignorance.
So the second way that we really want to involve you in getting the word out is to spread the word to people far and beyond those you know. The audience for this interview really is everyone who can't stand this world the way it is, who is sick and tired of so many people being treated as less than human, people who worry about the future of humanity, the destruction to the climate, the threat of nuclear war, everyone who's outraged that oppression and exploitation go on and on and on. Everybody who knows that the claim of liberty and justice for all in this country is a cruel lie. Everyone who's dreamed of something better or even wondered if this is possible, all of these people across the country need to know about these interviews. So we're going to be posting materials, PDFs of posters, palm cards, other promotional material that you can download and print on a special page at revcom.us. Post them all around, wherever you can, in laundromats, coffee shops, on lampposts in neighborhoods, on kiosks in the campuses. Also, spread the clips that we will be posting on our social media at the RevComs. Spread them on your own platforms. And if you want to help spread this interview online, we're inviting you to join a special Zoom meeting this Sunday, October 23rd. It'll be at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. Central. This will bring people together to make plans to push this out in a major way online. We'll post the details of how to register for this Zoom in this description of the video below. And if you have connections to people in the media, people with podcasts, other important networks that you could spread this interview to, write us at therevcoms@gmail.com with your ideas, and we can work with you on this.
And Sunsara, third, make a generous donation. Become a regular monthly donor to this show, the RNL Show, through our Patreon page. This enables us to have a regular flow of funds that we can rely on. It costs thousands of dollars for the studio, for the equipment, and to make the high-quality edit of these interviews, to print the promotional materials and place ads. It costs more for all of the organizing for revolution that this is all a part of and must serve. Right now, people are throwing millions of dollars into the dead end of the election, supporting so-called leaders who are about trying to find a place within this horrific system that is on track to destroy our world. People are being bombarded by misinformation and bullshit that keeps them confused, demoralized, and caught up in the ways of thinking and acting that keep this system going. The leadership and the future that Bob Avakian is fighting for cuts through all of this, but it needs to be funded. This only comes from those who really have a heart from humanity. This means you. We'll put a link in the description of this video and up on the screen right now for you to donate. Give $25, give $200, give $2,000, and do it today. Look, if you or someone you know is in position to make a very significant donation, let us know. Sunsara and I would be happy, more than happy, to talk with people about why they should give $10,000 or $20,000 or even $1,000 to this effort. Also, make plans to raise funds, whether through a bake sale or yard sale, phone banking with friends, donating a work of art, teaching a class, or many other creative ways. There are many important ways to not only raise the funds needed, but to bring people together to learn about this revolution as they do.
Of course, those who hate and fear revolution will try to badmouth and malign BA. But we can't let this keep BA from the masses of people who so desperately need to know about this revolutionary leader and the way out he is fighting for. So let us know what you run into as you spread this. Let us know positive things and negative things as you dig into this and take this out. And share with us your ideas. And we will be with you on this show and in other ways at revcom.us, through the Zooms we organize, and in other ways through this whole process.
Look, in bringing this to a close, let's go back to Bob Avakian on the stakes of this moment.
The masses of people in the world, and this is very acutely and urgently posed now, the masses of people in the world cannot any longer afford. It was always terrible that these are the people ruling the world, but it's now acutely posed. We can no longer afford to allow these imperialists to dominate the world and to determine the destiny of humanity. They need to be overthrown as quickly as possible.
We really can't let these people rule. So to conclude, I want to just make 3 brief points that we've discussed today. Number 1, Bob Avakian sitting down in this moment of great danger and great potential for really positive radical change is a really big deal. Number 2, the tremendous insight and guidance in these conversations, and more than that, a chance to meet this leader, to see this leader up close and personal and unrehearsed, is not to be missed. And 3, this can't be a secret. It has to be the occasion of really jumping the viewership of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show up to a whole other level. We have just posted a remarkable and an inspiring statement on our website, revcom.us, from the Communist Party of Iran, MLM, titled, "People of the World, take up the cry of revolution from Iran as your own." We're going to play the first few lines in Farsi, the main language in Iran, followed by Sunsara and myself reading the first 2 and then the closing paragraphs of this statement.
بیانیه‌ای به مردم جهان. بانگ انقلاب برخاسته از ایران متعلق به همه شماست. خیزش بزرگ و شگفت‌انگیزی که در 4 گوشه ایران مانند گل آتش شکفته است یک رخداد ایرانی نیست. غریو رهایی است که از گلوی بشریت تحت ستم به ویژه نیمه مؤنث آن فریاد زده می شود و در جستجوی رهایی است برای خلاصی از ستم‌های شرورانه و رنج‌های بیشماری که دولت فاشیست دینمدار جمهوری اسلامی بر مردم تحمیل می‌کند. صدایی که از ایران برخاسته با وجود خودویژگی و یکتایی‌اش اما فریاد رهایی بشریت است. به همین علت مردم دنیا از افغانستان و دیگر نقاط خاورمیانه تا آفریقای گرسنه و به تاراج رفته و حتی مردم کشورهای مرفه‌تر امپریالیستی اروپا و آمریکای شمالی با آن همزاد پینداری کرده و به شور آمدند.
People of the world, take up the cry of revolution from Iran as your own. What is unfolding with grandeur and magnificence in the 4 corners of Iran is not an Iranian event. It is a cry for liberation from oppressed humanity, especially the female half of humanity, to find a way out from the vicious, ugly oppression they are suffering under the fascist, theocratic state of the Islamic Republic of Iran. With all its particularity and uniqueness, theirs is a universal cry for human emancipation. That is why people from Afghanistan and the rest of the Middle East, all the way to poor, hungry, and devastated Africa, and even in the more prosperous imperialist countries of Europe and North America, are stirred by this cry. The uplifting and beautiful uprising triggered by the brutal murder of the young Gina Masa Amini at the hands of Iran's hated morality police was long overdue, because the enslavement of women has long been a pillar of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The world's people are right to be jubilant at how fearlessly the women in Iran are striking back at their patriarchal enslavement. They feel and see inspiring hope for getting rid of every kind of oppression in every corner of the world, a glimpse of humanity's potential to carve out a radically different world out of the oppression and exploitation that surrounds us. Especially at a time when the earth is on the verge of environmental collapse and the big capitalist imperialist gangsters, such as the US and Russia, threaten the world with nuclear Armageddon. So we call on you, the people of the world, and not your reactionary rulers, to stand in solidarity with the uprisings of Iran's people. The reactionary rulers of especially the Western imperialist countries shamelessly parade their so-called sympathy for the uprising, trying to hide the ugly truth of how they, and especially the US imperialists, have committed atrocious crimes to hold down the people of Iran and the Middle East for generations, carrying out bloody coups and imposing feudal sheikhs and shahs on the region's countries, all to ensure their prosperity and global domination. Enough. Imagine what it would mean to the people of Iran to see the faces of people in these countries and around the world rising up with them in the streets and declaring their own determination to fight for a radically new world.
And their statement concludes with this: "We call on you, the people of our precious planet, especially from Afghanistan, the US, the UK, Germany, France, Turkey, India, Pakistan, as well as China, Ukraine, and Russia, to stand with the uprising in Iran, to join your own yearnings for a radically new and better world to the hope beating in the hearts of Iran's heroic women and men. Go to our party's, the Communist Party of Iran, Marxist-Leninist-Maoist website for Farsi materials, and to revcom.us for English and Spanish materials on what a real revolution is and how the potential for a genuine revolution can be seized upon and turned into reality by building a powerful movement for revolution through leading the people to rely on and wield the whole new framework of human emancipation forged by Bob Avakian in the New Communism." The statement was issued by the CPI-MLM to coincide with international demonstrations called in support of the struggle of Iran for October 22nd, 2022. We want to encourage all of our viewers to go to revcom.us and download a PDF of this statement, the full statement. First off, you should go and read the statement, the full statement. We've only read a small part of it. And then bring these to the demonstration in Washington, D.C., or demonstrations wherever you are being held in conjunction with this call. All right, so that brings us to the end of this 124th episode of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show on October 20th, 2022. So we've just made a momentous announcement of the Bob Avakian on the RNL Show interviews that are coming up on November 3rd. We want you to spread today's show because it has that important announcement and it has the first question and answer from the second episode of these interviews. So we want you to spread this far and wide. We want you to go on the Zoom that's being called for this weekend. And what else, Sunsara?
Well, we've shared a lot. We really have something special that we're going to bring to you. So everything you can do to get the word out, to bring others into it, to let us know how it's going as you're out there. As always, we would love to hear from you in the comments section below. And with that, I think we should say goodnight, Andy.
All right. Well, I'm going to say goodnight to you, Sunsara, and good night for the entire Revolution Nothing Less crew, and good night from myself. We'll see you next week at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time for the next episode of our show preceding the premiere of the Bob Avakian interviews on the RNL Show on November 3rd. So good night.